Hello and welcome to another tier list video. Today we are taking a look at the Modern Warfare 2 weapons. Now this was one of my favorite Modern Warfares to play by far. Absolutely love this one. And this game definitely had some of the craziest, most broken weapon class layouts. So pretty excited to do this list, and there's a lot of guns that I really like on here and a lot of them that are kind of just hot garbage. So let's just jump right in. Starting us off, we have the MP5K. As far as SMGs go, it's really okay. I don't see a whole lot of people use this one. One fortunate thing is it's like got really high mobility, so if you want to make a class with like lightweight and marathon, having an MP5 is pretty good. You can run around the map pretty fast, but it's not that much faster like something that's a bit stronger than a UMP or P90. But overall, I would say the MP5K is pretty strong. Just not really doing anything too crazy, but pretty fun to use, and it's going to find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have the UMP45. Now, I absolutely love this gun. UMP45 with a suppressor, that's all I need. Honestly, my favorite SMG in this game by far. This was one of my most used guns in the game when I played MW2 a lot. And it's just a super strong gun. It's got good damage, decent fire rate, a decent ammo size, and really not a whole lot of recoil. And honestly, put a suppressor on it, it just feels so good to use. It's going to find itself in the S tier for sure. Up next, we have the Vector, which honestly, it is an okay gun. It has a pretty fast time to kill. The main issue for the Vector in Modern Warfare 2, in my opinion, is it has such low ammo capacity. I'm not sure exactly how many bullets it has without extended mags, but like you really got to be landing your shots if you don't have extended mags, because you are going to run out super quick, and it has a super high fire rate. So if you're not running extended mags, you better have good aim, because it burns through bullets super quick. And honestly, I've just never really been a huge fan of it. The super high fire rate, kind of low damage, but low ammo capacity, just doesn't really mesh well with me, and it's going to find itself down in the C tier. Up next, we have the Uzi. Now, honestly, this is another one that I don't think is anything too great. It has a pretty high fire rate, pretty high recoil though, but I would say it has a bit more manageability than the Vector does. The high fire rate is a little bit more manageable because it has a bit more ammo capacity as well, so the Uzi is okay, but as far as other SMGs go, I'm not a huge fan. That being said, one thing I did like about the Uzis is in Modern Warfare 2, you can have any SMG akimbo, and Uzi's akimbo with steady aim, running around with that, it just felt good. It was just fun to do, so if you've never given that a try, I recommend it. It's a pretty fun class, and not a lot of people do it, and you can kill somebody in like half a second with akimbo Uzis, so honestly, pretty much just for that reason alone, it's going to find itself up in the B tier. Up next, we have the P90. Now, honestly, in pretty much every single Call of Duty that the P90 is in, I love the P90. I don't quite love it as much as the UMP45 in Modern Warfare 2, but I really like it. It's got a large magazine capacity, good fire rate, not too much recoil. Honestly, P90 with the suppressor, I run around with that for days. Huge fan of the P90. It's also going to find itself in the S tier. Not quite as good as the UMP in this game for me, but still love the P90 as well. Up next, we have the assault rifles. The first one is the M4A1. This is just overall a pretty good assault rifle. Like, it's got decent ammo capacity, not a lot of recoil, decent fire rate. Overall, it's just a really good, well-rounded assault rifle. Really nothing to complain about. Even the iron sight is pretty good, so if you're not feeling like a red dot or some other sight, it's just overall a pretty solid assault rifle. That being said, in my opinion, in Modern Warfare 2, there are some really good assault rifles, and just being a solid assault rifle isn't quite enough to really put it up there. So the M4, even though it's solid, it's only going to find itself in the B tier, just because the other assault rifles are just so good. Up next, we have the M16. Now, this is a 3-round burst assault rifle, and honestly, I'm not a huge fan of 3-round burst weapons typically. But the M16 is still pretty good. You put stopping power on that, honestly, you put 3 bullets into somebody and they're dead. And if you can hit him in the upper chest, usually you can take him down with 2 bullets sometimes if you have stopping power. So overall, I would say the M16 is pretty strong, but personally, I'm not a huge fan of 3-round burst weapons, and I'm just ranking these based on how much I like to use them, not necessarily how strong they are. So even though I think the M16 is a really strong assault rifle, I'm not a huge fan of it personally, so it's going to find itself down in the C tier. Up next, we have the Famas. Now, this is pretty similar to the M16, 3-round burst weapon. Stopping power, 3 bullets into the chest, they're going to die. The only difference is that the Famas has a bit less damage than the M16. The M16, if you're running stopping power, if you hit 2 bullets in the upper chest, usually it's enough, so you don't even need to hit the whole burst. But the Famas, unless you're hitting a headshot with one of those bullets, you're going to need to hit them in the chest with all 3 bullets to take them down. So the Famas, you can shoot it a bit faster than the M16, but personally, I think if you're going to be running a 3-round burst weapon, just run the M16. It's just a bit stronger and just feels a bit better to use. So the Famas is going to find itself down in the D tier for me. Up next, we have the Scar H. Now, the Scar is another gun that I love using in pretty much every single Call of Duty that it has, with the exception of maybe Black Ops 2. I wasn't a huge fan of that one. But honestly, Modern Warfare 2, I love the Scar H. Scar H with the suppressor was one of the guns that I used a lot. This was probably my most used assault rifle. Yes, I even used it more than the ACR. But honestly, I just really love the Scar. And honestly, it's going to find itself in the S tier. It's hard for me to put it anywhere below the S tier. I just love using this gun so much. MW2, MW3, I mean, those Scars are just one of my favorite guns to use. Up next, we have the FAL, which was the single fire gun. Now, I've never really been a fan of single fire assault rifles. If you can shoot it pretty fast and accurately, good for you. But for me, I'm just not good at shooting it really fast and keeping my aim on target at the same time. So the FAL, it's really just not for me. It's still a really good gun, really strong with stopping power. You can take somebody down in 2 shots really easily. But for me, it's just not my kind of gun. So the FAL, unfortunately, is going to find itself down in the D tier. Up next, we have the ACR. Yes, this is one of the terrors of Modern Warfare 2. You go into multiplayer, half the servers usually running the ACR because it is so good in this game. It's got really solid fire rate, good ammo capacity, and if you put a suppressor on that, you basically have like no recoil. It is crazy. It is such a small amount of recoil. It feels so good to use. It's got a good iron sight, but you put a red dot on that, it still feels just as good. The ACR, it's not even my favorite assault rifle. I like to use the Scar more, but it's just so good that it would be a sin for me to put it anywhere less than the S tier, so it's got to find itself up there. Up next, we have the TAR-21. Now, this is another assault rifle that I really like to use. Put a suppressor on it. I just loved the way that it sounded. In terms of like damage, it's pretty good. Fire rate, pretty good. Ammo capacity, pretty good. It's another well-rounded assault rifle. Sorry, I would say it's on a pretty similar level as the M4. I would personally say it's a bit stronger, but I just like to use it much more than the M4. The sound it makes with a suppressor, I just love the sound it makes, and it's going to find itself up in the A tier. Up next, we have the F2000. Now, this is kind of a weird gun. It's almost halfway between an SMG and an assault rifle for me because it has pretty high rate of fire, but it's got a big magazine size, so you got a lot of bullets. But then it has a pretty short range. Like if you're pretty far away, it's kind of hard to land all your shots, and it's not doing a whole lot of damage. The damage drop off is pretty quick. But some people really like it. Personally, I've never really had much success with it. As far as assault rifles go, I really wasn't much of a fan of using it, so the F2000 is going to find itself down in the C tier. Up next, we have the AK-47. Now, honestly, no matter what you say about this gun was my first ever nuke in Modern Warfare 2. I can still remember it playing on a state domination. Had an AK-47 with red dot, and man, I think I had a TAC helicopter, AC-130, and nuke. I've never sweat so much in my life getting that first nuke. There was just no other feeling like it. So the AK, I think it's really good in this game. Not quite in the S tier for me, but just the fact that I had a nuke on it, I gotta love it. It's gonna find itself in the A tier for sure. Up next, we're getting into the LMGs. The first one is the LSW. Some people really liked this gun, but personally, I was never really a fan of it. I usually like LMGs in Call of Duties, but in Modern Warfare 2, I wasn't too huge of a fan of them, and the LSW especially, I felt like, it had, high rate of fire, high magazine size, but the recoil for me, I just really wasn't a fan of it. I felt like the recoil pattern was just so jumpy, going all over the place, so the LSW, unfortunately, going to find itself down in the D tier. Up next, we have the RPD, which is another one that's pretty similar to the LSW, I would say. I think it just has a little bit more damage, a little bit less fire rate, but I would say the recoil is a bit more manageable. The RPD, it's not my favorite gun to use, but, it's alright. A little bit better than the LSW, so it's going to find itself up in the C tier. Up next, we have the AUG hbar. Now, this is interesting because the AUG in other games is typically an assault rifle, but this is the hbar version, which is more of an LMG. This thing, it had relatively small ammo capacity as far as LMGs go. It had a pretty low rate of fire, but the damage was pretty good. Personally, I actually quite liked using this. As far as LMGs go, this is probably the one I used the most. It just felt good, and I think it's because it felt more like an assault rifle than an LMG in a lot of ways. And overall, I would say it's a pretty good gun. It's not insane, but it's got good damage, you know, a nice steady fire rate. So, you know, if you like something with good accuracy, you know, not too fast of a fire rate, not too difficult recoil to control, I think the AUG is a pretty good choice in this game, and it's going to find itself in the B tier for me. Up next, we have the MG4. Now, this is a light machine gun that has pretty low recoil, pretty good rate of fire, high magazine size, but like, you know, really manageable recoil control as far as LMGs typically go. So if you like an LMG that, you know, has not too much recoil but still has decent rate of fire, decent damage, I would say the MG4 is pretty good. The main drawback for this is the time to kill is relatively slow, because the damage per shot is really not that high for the fire rate that it has. So you're not going to be killing people super fast, but if you want an LMG that has a bit more manageable as far as recoil goes, I think the MG4 is a pretty good choice. And I liked using it, but it wasn't my favorite, so it's only going to find itself in the C tier. Up next, we have the M240. Now, I would say this is probably one of the most popular LMGs, and I would say for a good reason. It looked cool, it sounded cool, it had high rate of fire. The damage wasn't that high, but this thing fired really fast. It had quite a bit of recoil, so it could be kind of hard to control if you were really spraying with it. But man, it looked cool and it felt good to use. And honestly, I had actually quite a few high kill streaks with this one. Never got a nuke with this one, but I did have quite a few kill streaks, and even when I didn't even use it that much, I was still able to pull out some pretty good games. So the M240, honestly, I gotta put it in at least at the A tier. Up next, we're getting into the sniper rifles, and starting us off, we have the Barrett 50 cal. Now, I love the Barrett. I think in every single Call of Duty that it's in, it looks so cool, it sounds cool, and I just love using it. Honestly, really no complaints about the Barrett. Pretty much every single game you play that it's in, you kind of know what you're going to get. You know, a nice one-shot kill weapon. Lots of recoil if you're trying to spam it. I wouldn't really recommend it that way, but, you know, it is semi-auto, so you can fire it a bit faster than the bolt actions. But the Barrett 50 cal, just a really solid sniper, and going to find itself in the A tier. Up next, we have the Intervention, which, in terms of, like, damage and, you know, stats and accuracy, it's pretty much the same as the Barrett 50 cal. But man, the Intervention in this game, it just looks so cool. I mean, if you were quickscoping in Modern Warfare 2, you were using the Intervention. Sure, you could use the Barrett, but no, you were using the Intervention. And for good reason. This thing was so cool. It felt so good when you were pulling off those quickscopes. I spent so many hours playing with in, you know, private matches with friends, just quickscoping at the Intervention for days. It's just such an iconic Modern Warfare 2 weapon. When I think of Modern Warfare 2, the Intervention is honestly the first one I think of, so I gotta put it in the S tier. It's just such an iconic weapon that I really can't put it anywhere lower. Up next, we have the WA2000. Now, sorry for you WA2000 fans out there, but I think this gun is complete trash. It's semi-auto, but you really can't even fire it that fast, and even with stopping power, it's almost never a one-shot unless you're hitting them in the head or the neck. So WA2000, honestly, I'm sorry. I think it's trash. It's gonna find itself in the F tier. If you want a semi-auto, let's look at this next gun, which is the M21 hbar. This one you can fire super quick. This one also at least a 2-shot unless you're hitting them in the head. But you can fire so quickly this one that basically 2 shots, you can get them off like that. As far as semi-auto sniper rifles go, I think this one is actually pretty good. I think semi-auto sniper rifles in a lot of Call of Duties really suck. Looking at you, Dragonov, from every single Call of Duty that you're in. But the M21 hbar, I think it's actually really good. Just compared to other sniper rifles, I just prefer, you know, one shot, one kill, so I'm not somebody who uses semi-auto sniper rifles a lot, but I still think it's really solid, and it's going to find itself in the B tier. Now we have the final primary weapon, the Riot Shield. This was the first Call of Duty they had the Riot Shield in, and man, this one pissed me off so much. I mean, there were so many times where, you know, people were trolling me with the Riot Shield, and I think what makes the Riot Shield so good in Modern Warfare 2 is, what we'll get into in a second, is the secondary weapons in Modern Warfare 2, I would say, are by far the best secondary weapons in any Call of Duty. They are so strong, so busted, better than some primary weapons. So running the Riot Shield, you weren't even putting yourself at a disadvantage because you would have such good secondary weapons. So running the Riot Shield, I think it's pretty solid. I personally didn't run it a whole lot, but I did sometimes, and honestly, it's just really strong. I gotta at least put the Riot Shield in the A tier. Up next, we're getting into the secondary weapons, and we're starting off with the pistols. The first one being the USP 45. Now, honestly, as far as pistols go, it's not terrible. It's okay, but it's not even the strongest pistol, and for me, it's kind of just a weaker version of the M9 pistol, so I've never really been a huge fan of the USP 45. I know a lot of people ran this one akimbo as a secondary on a lot of sniper rifle classes, but overall, I was never really a huge fan, and I'm actually going to put it down in the D tier. Up next, we have the Magnums. Now, this one, I don't really think the Magnum is that strong unless you are running it with akimbo and steady aim. Akimbo steady aim Magnums is really good. I know a lot of people actually ran this combo with a Riot shield and just pretty much ran around with the Magnums. That definitely feels pretty good because with steady aim, your crosshairs are actually pretty small with the akimbo Magnums, and you can pretty much, you know, just spam those things pretty quick. So, pretty solid choice, but for me, I would say unless you're running a akimbo, I think the Magnums are really not that good, so it's going to kind of balance out and only find itself in the C tier. Up next, we have the M9 pistol. And this is probably my favorite pistol in the game. I think it feels pretty good. Even if you're just using one, you can spam it really quick and it has virtually no recoil, but akimbo M9s is also pretty good as well. Just a pretty well-balanced pistol, you know, low recoil, good ammo size, good fire rate. It just feels pretty good to use, and it's going to find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have the Desert Eagle. Honestly, just such an iconic weapon from Call of Duty's. It looks cool, it sounds cool, it feels good to use. That being said, it's just not that strong. You know, if you run a single one, it's kind of hard because it has so much recoil, so you can't really spam it effectively. And if you run it akimbo, your crosshairs, even with steady aim, are pretty big, so you're pretty inaccurate. So I love the Desert Eagle, but in terms of viability and how much I like to use it, I didn't really like using it that much in this game, so it's only going to find itself in a C tier. Up next, we're getting into the shotguns. Starting us off, we have the SPAS 12, which I would say is a pretty well-rounded shotgun. You know, it's a pump shotgun. Decent damage, decent range, but in my opinion, if you want to run a pump shotgun, well, this isn't the one to really run. We'll talk later, but SPAS 12 gonna be in the D tier, unfortunately. Up next, we have the Ranger, which is a double barrel shotgun. Now, I know some people ran this one akimbo, and honestly, you could destroy people, but if you were running these akimbo, you pretty much needed to be literally right next to them in order to pull it off effectively. So I know some people liked running the Rangers. Personally, I wasn't really a fan. I'm never really a fan of double barrel shotguns in general, so the Ranger, honestly, gonna be another D tier for me. Up next, we have the Striker. Now this one, absolute menace in Modern Warfare 3. In Modern Warfare 2, it's really not that good. It's semi-auto, it's okay, it's decent. But as far as shotguns go in this game, it's really not that strong, and honestly, going to be joining the first two shotguns in the D tier. Up next, we have the M1014 shotgun. This was a semi-auto shotgun, and I would say this one is pretty good to use. You know, being semi-auto, you can fire this thing pretty quickly. It's got decent range, decent damage. Overall, I would say of the shotguns we've seen so far, this is definitely the strongest one, and it's going to be finding itself in the B tier. Up next, we have the Model 1887. Oh man, what can I say about this gun? This thing was absolutely busted. It did get nerfed eventually, but even after the nerf, akimbo Model 1887s were one of the strongest guns in the game. You could shoot somebody, if you shot both at once, from way, way too far. It was incredibly broken. I know a ton of people that ran Riot Shield and akimbo Model 1887s and just ran around the map with like Marathon and Lightweight Pro. This thing was completely busted. I can't believe that they even released the game in the state that this gun was. It was way, way too good. Honestly, like the ACR for me, it would be a sin to put this thing anywhere less than the S tier. It was just so, so strong. Up next, we have the AA-12, which was the fully auto shotgun. Honestly, I would say this one, in terms of power level and how much I like to use it, fits a pretty similar role to the M1014. It's got really low ammo capacity, of course. I think it only held 8 shots in this game, but if you were looking to clear a room really quick, I mean, you could walk in and just hold down the trigger and kill everybody, but once again, it's nothing you couldn't do with the Model 1887, so it's good, but it's not insane, and the AA-12 is going to find itself in the C tier. Up next, we're getting into the machine pistols, and honestly, I think you could pick any of these, and it's always going to be a pretty good secondary, but starting us off, we have the PP2000. And truthfully, this thing could have been a submachine gun. Like, that's how good I think it is. Every time I ran a sniper rifle class, I would always run a PP2000 with a suppressor on it or extended mag as a secondary. It's just so good. It had good damage, good fire rate, decent ammo capacity, especially if you're running extended mags. Overall, it just felt really good to use. It had pretty good range. Like for a machine pistol, you can pick people off from pretty far away. And overall, just a really solid gun, and it's going to find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have the G18s, the Glock 18s. This is a fully auto pistol. It's semi-auto in most games, but this one, it's fully auto. And honestly, this thing, if you have it akimbo, I think this gun is insane. Steady aim, Glock 18's akimbo. Super, super fast time to kill. You know, it's almost similar to like the Uzis, but you have a much smaller crosshair. That being said, you burn through your ammo really quick, so you got to take them out quick. But with akimbo Glock 18s, you can take them out quick. If you want to run something that's going to be akimbo, I would say this is a really good choice for your secondary, and it's going to find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have the MP9, which I would say was probably the weakest of the machine pistols in my opinion. I still think it's pretty good, but for me, it fits a similar niche as the PP2000, but it just has a bit more recoil. You know, it's a bit too jumpy for me, so not quite as big of a fan, but overall, it's still decent, it's still viable, and it's going to find itself in the C tier. Up next, we have the Raffica, which was the 3-round burst machine pistol. Now this one, I would say if you're just using one is okay. Usually you need to hit 2 bursts in order to take somebody down. Maybe if you hit all 3 in the upper chest and you have stopping power, you can 1 burst somebody, but I think the Rafficas were strongest when you run an akimbo and you have steady aim. Just spamming those things, you could kill people really fast. You know, if the Glock 18s are a little bit too crazy for you, if they too much recoil, maybe burns through ammo too quick, I think the Rafficas are a really good choice. You can spam these for days. They got good ammo capacity, and they're also going to find themselves in the B tier. Up next, we're getting into the launchers, and starting us off, we have the Thumper. Honestly, this thing was kind of garbage. Going to be in the F tier. I don't think I need to say much more about that one. Really not good. Don't use the Thumper. Even with danger close, don't use it. Feels bad. Just use a grenade launcher and assault rifle. Up next, we have the AT4HS, which was a single-shot rocket launcher, which can also lock on. This thing, it kind of fits a niche halfway in between the RPG and the Stinger, because you can lock onto stuff, but it doesn't do nearly as much damage as the Stinger. So you're really only going to be shooting down UAVs or maybe burning a flare on a kill streak. But overall, I think this thing is okay, but it kind of just does the job of the RPG and the Stinger at the same time, but it does both of them a little bit worse, and you're better off just picking one or the other. So the AT4 is going to find itself down in the D tier. Up next, we have the RPG. Now, this thing, if you were running danger close, was a menace. Like, this thing, you'd be dying from like 500 yards away. This thing with danger close was a true menace, especially on smaller maps or maps where, you know, there was a lot of buildings. You know, you shoot this thing into a building, if somebody's in there, they're dead. RPG, if there wasn't danger close, I would say this thing's not that good, but with danger close, RPG, really, really good, and it's going to find itself in the B tier. Up next, we have the Stinger. Now, not a lot of people like the Stinger, but I am somebody who loves shooting down kill streaks. Like, I ran the Stinger on pretty much every single class except my sniper rifle classes and my riot shield classes, I suppose, but I love, love, love shooting down kill streaks in every single game. I know a lot of people hate me for it, but I just get so much joy about shooting them down, and the Stinger, it's the best one to do it. It's quick to lock on, it's quick to shoot, quick to land. You get 2 shots, Stinger, I gotta put it in the S tier, I'm sorry, but I love the Stinger. Up next, we have the Javelin. Now, this one is interesting because it kind of, you know, when you shoot it, it goes up in the air and then comes down. And so if you're taking down something like a Pavlo, which normally has flares, the Javelin actually hits it even without the flares because it comes straight down. I found that in some games, sometimes it would still miss, but most of the time, you would hit even regardless. But the Javelin is interesting because you can also lock onto pieces of land. So, you know, if you're way away from an objective, you can actually lock onto a piece of land. And if you have danger close, the Javelin makes a huge explosion. That being said, you gotta hope that the enemy stays there for like 10 seconds because it does take quite a while to land. But the Javelin is just a pretty fun launcher to use. Not my favorite, but, you know, it has its place in the game for sure. And it's gonna find itself in the B tier. Well, that's my list. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and I hope you enjoyed.